In this video, I want to explore the different iterations of my relationship with the great work in, to use Lazaris terminology, and to recap what I understand about that. We begin with the ego story, which is the fractal representation of the cult or culture. So the larger cult or culture, system of memes, system of securing needs, survival, security, etc., largely, I think, through the reptilian and rational brain, moving into the empathic brain. But there's a tremendous amount of underlying foundational human animal, where it's the fight, flight, freeze protocol, where you run from what's bigger than you because it's sociopathic, right? What's bigger than you in a sociopathic is trying to consume you. And you fight what is smaller than you. You can watch this in animal dynamics. You can watch it in human dynamics. You can watch it in corporate dynamics, right? Why was Bill Gates so afraid? If you read his biography, he'd watched small companies being bullied, being consumed by larger companies. And so one of Gates' tendencies is called constructive pessimism, where you're frightened of things, but rather than give up, that's destructive pessimism, you fight like hell in order to overcome what you're frightened of, to make sure what you're afraid of doesn't happen. And Gates's biggest fear was being consumed, being knocked out of the way, because he'd studied large companies. Almost all large companies 100 years ago have been knocked out of the way. And so he developed a war chest. And the name is insightful, a war chest of $30 billion to bully and fight off other bullies that would try and consume Microsoft. And that's the reptilian playbook. That's the reptilian brain. It's the brain stem. And in that dynamic, there's aggressor and victim. And, to the extent that you try to move into feelings, self-importance and self-pity, etc., these are the reptilian playbook, and they're the basis of competition, capitalism, etc. The goal, right? If you look at the goal in the evolution of consciousness, the goal of competition is to breed competence, right? Because competence leads to abundance, right? And so that's the basis in many ways for capitalism competing more effectively than communism is the competitive nature, right? That if you have 1 billion people all trying to climb through superior technology, through superior protocols, which is a technology. Language is a technology. Ideas are technology. Protocols are technology that you climb by having more efficient technology. You can get to the goal faster than the competition. And if you do that, if you iterate to constantly get more value with less energy, then you gradually consume the ecology around you, the energy patterns around you that are less efficient. And life progresses. Life moves from less efficient protocols into more efficient protocols that have more grace, right? Lazaris's definition of grace is, to have it all with little or no effort, right? That's the movement towards intelligence, to generate more value with less time, money, and natural resources, less energy, to move towards that. So you have the ideals of efficiency, of grace, of intelligence, of sustainability, right? Because if you're consuming vast amounts of time, money, and natural resources to make things worse, you're not only unsustainable, you're stupid. And you will become part of the 99% of forms throughout history, throughout life's evolution that do not exist anymore. Life has consumed 99.9% of all life forms that used to exist, that don't exist any longer, that have been consumed with more efficient life forms, such as our own. And so that statistic, I think, is important to be aware of. There is a 99.9% statistical probability that every form that we know of in the universe today will be consumed in the next trillion years by something more efficient, will evolve into something more. And the reptilian protocol, fight, flight, freeze, run from what's bigger than you. And if you're smarter than what's bigger than you, you escape. Dominate what's smaller than you if you're bigger, right? This is the attitude of many countries, including the United States today. If you look at how the United States behaves over the last 100 years as it's come to, currently be the main superpower, it's less regard for other people. In other words, there's a strong fear base. The reptilian brain is based on fear of pain, right? Well, the United States has become, and it's interesting, as the United States has become bigger, it has become more of a bully around the world. And the United States is just an aggregate composite of human consciousness in a particular country, right? So the reptilian brain is there as a foundation. You speak warmly to someone, go out, etc., meet, etc., but in the back of your mind, are they up to something, right? There's a foundation of fear, of pain, and that's the reptilian brain. There's an awareness of that's not wise to go into a dark alley with this person that I don't know very well. Why? Well, they've got the advantage, right, in the dark alley that they know that I've not been in, right? So So that's a program. That's a code. That's the foundation. It's the oldest brain, but it is life's mechanism to breed efficiency, to breed intelligence, to breed competency. And it's a cruel system, right? If you're an infant and you encounter a dinosaur, you are going to die because the dinosaur is bigger and more ruthless, right? It's a cruel way of breeding competency. So then the parents have to become smarter at protecting their young from dinosaurs, from any number of, from viruses, et cetera, or they die out, right? And so there has to be a protective element. Otherwise, there is extinction, there's death, right? But we move into rationality, and with that, we move into what's called enlightened self-interest, which basically says, if we go to war, you already know that I'm going to beat you because I've got more nuclear missiles, or that I've got more ground troops, or I've got 10 million in the bank and you can't pay your legal fees. So you don't want to go into a war with me. And I'll conserve energy too if I don't go into a war with you, because I've got nothing to prove. It's clear that I've got the upper hand here. So why don't we cooperate? Why don't we do this nonviolently? Because nonviolence is more efficient for both parties, right? It's stupid to go into a physical conflict if you can obtain the same ends without it. Now, we are stupid, and so we do it regularly. The United States has entered, I think, 1,000 armed conflicts from the 1990s, whether it's bombing Libya or, various things. The United States is stupid because it's an aggregate of its people, which has an element of stupidity, right? And this is not picking out the United States. The dominant power throughout the rise and fall of empires has generally been more arrogant and often stupid in its arrogance, right? So nothing personal. That's just what's going on and has been going on in the last 1,000 years. But the movement towards law, the movement towards rationality is, a movement towards intelligence. Let's just acknowledge here that, you've got a jet fighter plane and I've got a go-kart. You're going to win the race. So we don't have to have the race because we already know the outcome, right? And so let's not fight about that. We have to fight about something else where there's a tension, where we're not clear, right? Communism has lost, clearly, right? We had to fight about it until we could see, there hasn't been a single successful communist country that has done as well as capitalism, right? So we had to fight about that because there are still diehard believers, right? That if only I had been running the Communist Party, if only I had been, right? That's the arrogance, right? To think somehow I'm special, that I can transcend the limits of a system, of an idea. And sometimes that's true, right? Sometimes a king, for example, the last king of Thailand, very deeply beloved by their people, the king seemed to have done better by its people and for its people and country than a democracy in many ways, right? Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore has done a tremendous amount, right? And you could say it's their vision, right? But how do you systemize that, right? It's what if you give total power to someone and roll the dice or whatever, and because an uneducated population cannot elect the best people. It takes an educated population to elect the best people, and it takes the best people to create an educated population. So, you are where you are because neither you nor anyone else in your system could do better, right? Right. I'm too stupid to solve the stupidity around me, right? Because there is a way to solve the stupidity around me. Now, obviously, I don't know what it is, which makes me part of the system, right? If I knew what it is, why haven't I solved it, right? That's the obvious question. You're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid, and you're too stupid to solve that stupidity, right? That's the way it goes. So, it can be useful to point out what we see in our reality. That's unfair, right? That's dumb. Okay. What am I going to do about it? I don't know. Okay, I'm going to program, I'm going to do this. Okay, well, has it solved it, right? Right? I don't even know the right technology to sort this out. Is there a shift, right? And so, that's, I think it's useful to go from a myopic view of us as individuals, intention or distinct, right? Because, if you're so smart, why aren't you smart enough to teach the dumb people, A, how smart you are, and B, what to do to be smart? And if you're not smart enough to teach dumb people, you're not that smart, right? So it's a great equalizer, right? We're participants in a system, right? And whatever goes on in that system, by definition, it's the innate drive in all life forms to become better, to become more. And we've become better, and we've become more. We are better, and we are more than we were. But we're not more than we are. We're not better than we are. And it's our drive. It's the innate drive of life. Life wants to become better, wants to become more, is becoming better, has become better, has become more, is becoming more. That's innate. The code of life, of which we are a very small part, is evolutionary in the largest context, right? And in order for some things to evolve, other things devolve, right? When I eat a carrot, I devolve that carrot into its simpler energy forms and turn it into something more complex. And so in order for the larger patterns of life to evolve, we simplify smaller patterns. We break them apart into energy, right? After I've digested the carrot, it's no longer the complexity of a carrot. It's released into a simpler form, right? And so understanding that, what's releasing it into a simpler form, a more complex form, a form capable of plucking it and eating it, right? And so in the larger sense, right, humans in many ways have developed more complex technology than dinosaurs, right? And so that destruction, another iteration at life, another evolution at life. See, life is betting on everything. Life holds every card. Right? Life has a dollar bet on humans, a dollar bet on rats, a dollar bet on mice, a dollar bet on this country, on that country. Life is is heavily invested in life, which means that no matter what happens, life is a winner, because life is a part of every single thing that has been, is, and that will be. Life is a winner. Life is heavily invested. Life is a participant in everything. And the little shell of dissociation, the shell of identity, the pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being that we say this is me and that's life, that's not how life looks at it. That's life, this is life, your life, right? But within the framework. So why is life showing up in this either or tension, where it seems like it's me and then it's you? Why is life doing that? Well, it's breeding competition. If you're in business and you know that 90% of businesses fail in the first 20 years, 90%. What's going to be the business that wins for 20 years? Not a sugar daddy business, right? They're going to get tired of you after 20 years, right? You're old. Not corruption. Corruption doesn't tend to last 20 years. But if you consistently become excellent, more excellent than 90% of your competitors, statistically speaking, you're going to grow, right? Excellence is a better technology for sustainable growth to beat the odds, right? So life is breeding for excellence because that's what wins in the end. Nepotism, corruption, bribery, blackmail, they don't have 100-year spans. I certainly don't have 1,000-year spans. Excellence has a trillion-year span. If you keep getting better at whatever it is you're doing, however you're serving life, however you're serving grace, if you keep getting better, excellence has a trillion-year lifespan. Intelligence has a trillion-year lifespan. If you keep learning more efficient ways to generate sustainable value, you can keep doing that for 1 trillion years, and you'll be better off than if you didn't do that, statistically speaking. It's not to say that there aren't curveballs. It's not to say that you might not get knocked out before you could get established by a company founded on nepotism in a totalitarian state. It's just not going to last, right? In the end, intelligence transcends, succeeds over nepotism. Partnership and synergy succeeds over hostility and war in the trillion-year picture. It's more efficient. It's more intelligent, right? So it's the path, right? But how do you deal with nepotism along the way, right? How do you deal with corruption along the way? How do you deal with sociopathic bullies along the way? When Oracle takes PeopleSoft out of the picture because it can, because it's bigger. When the better product fails, right? Well, that's also, these layers of programs are foundational. Like the bottom code is fight, flight, freeze, is bigger, is better. That's the bottom code. You don't get to go on to the other codes without learning the lessons of competency, right? Which means competency to evade the bully until you're strong enough to be the bully, and then the competency to not be the bully because collaboration works better from a position of strength, not from a position of weakness, right? When you're surrounded by stupidity, i.e. bullies, when you're surrounded by stupidity, short-term thinking, and you're the weak one, you can't teach. You've got to become the strong one to be in a place to teach. Well, how are you going to become the strong one if you don't learn that foundation of the reptilian brain and its importance? Now, this is all around. I had a Lazaris friend who was not interested in learning how to run his business, etc. He was doing Lazaris techniques over and over again. They weren't working. And I said, look, you've got to get a few employees. You got to read a few business books, right? No. He was going to do the rising resonance, going from his state. And he felt shame. It was a failure, etc. But he wasn't going to listen to me because I wasn't doing all that well either. I wasn't interested in money at the time. I would make as much money to sustain my lifestyle and just stop working for the year. Well, his ideal, right, to have more money, to have more sex, right, he had this fantasy, it just wasn't working, right? So one of the things I did for him was become more successful. I tripled my income for him because that's the only thing he could see as successful. I tripled my income for him. I had more adventures. I had more sex. He loved hearing all about it, right? Well, then he was interested in what I had to say because I was embodying more of his ideal And so I coached him from a position of strength, something he respected. We all create deities that are embodiments of our ideals, and we bow to our ideals, our versions of beauty, truth, and goodness. And it is irritating. It was irritating to me that he paid zero attention to the competencies I had. Like, he wanted different things than I, but he paid attention when I became stronger. That's a Lazaris friend, right? These things are not, there's no difference between the Lazaris community and the US military, or the Lazaris community and some other community, Scientologists, whatever, right? We're dealing with the same core brain operation, similar reasons, same emotional language, same psychic structures, right? Same backdrops, and largely the same statistics, right? It's not clear that joining the Lazaris community ups your odds in any particular outer way relative to, some other group, right? The odds of sustainable well-being, how much pain you're in, how successful you are in whatever metric, it's not clear, right? And Lazaris alluded to this. I mean, there's the Pareto principle, which is very unpopular amongst idealists, because what it means is that your top one person in a company will generate more of the value for that company in many cases statistically than maybe the bottom half. So your top 1% in an organization or a country is going to do more good in the world than the other 50% combined. That would be an example of the Pareto principle, right? The 80-20 principle, which is kind of leading towards that. 20% of what we do creates 80% of our problems and 80% of our benefits, a different 20%, right? That there's this concentration. The top income earners have, maybe 90% of the wealth, right? And we're part of that in the world, right? We're part of that 1% at a global level. If you earn more than $60,000 a year, you're part of the global 1%. And that 1% has more impact than the other 50% in many areas, right? So, that's something to be aware of. And Lazaris, in, I think, a good moment of candor, brought that into the room, right, in the workshop. Like, it's fine to say that 2%, 2% of the global population is enlightened or whatever. It's fine to say that 2% of the country is enlightened. He said, but what about 2% of the people here in this workshop? He's pointing out the Pareto principle doesn't dissipate when you step inside a Lazaris workshop. Right? That there's maybe 2%. In other words, there might be 10 people, 5 people, 2 people at a given event of Lazaris that are really getting it much more than the other 98%. And Lazaris plays this game, right? Because on the other hand, he'll say it's I'm going back to the great work, right? The great work is rare, right? It's very few people have had the opportunity to do the great work, right? But it's definitely available for you, which means everyone in the room, right? But what about that 2%? So there's, and the science shows that positive lies seem to be a little better. In other words, the science shows that we all have positive lies about ourselves. Well, actually, that's not true. That's not true. We don't all have positive lives. What they've shown is that some people, more nihilistic people, actually see things as they are without any positive spin. And they're more accurate about what is and isn't happening. And they don't enjoy life as much and they don't succeed as much because they're in touch with the accurate data as it is now. Whereas most people, and some more than others, have a rose-colored version of themselves. They don't see their true ugliness as much as, say, someone else might see their ugliness. And those people will feel better and do better, right? And the same is even true when you look at other people. If you project slightly ahead of where someone is going to be, like this is where children are so great, right? Because children are innocent, right? And so they look at a grandfather that may have just raped a town of economic sustainability, moved all the jobs offshore to save $2 an hour with no regard for transition or anything like that. You know, a 2-year-old looks at that person and says, "You're going to like me, aren't you? You're going to take care of me, aren't you?" Smiles and plays. You know, and someone who just, to save $10,000 on the bottom line, just shipped off a town's sense of livelihood with little or no thought. That's sociopathic. That's business. That's capitalism. That's competition. Right? And so there's a kindness, right? There's a kindness in breeding for competence. You know, that's what the reptilian brain is for, is to measure and breed for competence. Because only competence can create abundance, right? The secondary level, the rational brains and later the human brain, has to rest on a foundation of abundance. You cannot be empathic statistically from a position of impoverishment, pain, and fear. Empathy relies on well-being, which relies upon competence, which relies upon competition, which relies on fear, right? And so there's a hierarchy of evolution. And so, right? But that 2-year-old is going to generally get a better result out of grandpa than I am. Because I look at the cold-hearted son of a bitch and I say, yeah, $10,000 or a small town. You chose the $10,000 like a reptile. You made the choice from the 100-million-year-old reptile, not from the human being. You valued money, the symbol of value, over human beings. You're a reptile. And I do not trust reptiles to have my interest at heart. To have a heart, right? But the 2-year-old does, right? And granddad finds his humanity, not in my judgment, not in my cynicism, in the trust of a 2-year-old grandchild, right? And so you have, you know, that positive projection leads the way, leads to evolution, right? Granddad becomes a little bit more human in response to the positive projection of innocence, right? So that's the studies. In other words, being focused on the truth statistically is not always the best way to bring the best part out of other people in the world. Sometimes you have to lead with delusions, right? You'd never hurt anyone, would you, right? Well, that projection can lead the way into identity evolution from sociopathic to rational sociopathic towards rational empathy towards being a human being. And so that's, you know, that's there, right? That this is all present in part of this as we move from the human story of abuse, of predation, of reptilian behavior, of trauma, towards the self story of overcoming that, where the self learns to transcend the reptilian brain, to triumph over the dystopian algorithms, right? And find something more. What's more, right? Well, if you climb in the hierarchy of human needs, you have survival, reptilian, security of survival, rational, reptile. So you move into love and belonging, right? The third in the hierarchy of needs. That's when you first have access and the need for an empathic brain. The search for something more than survival and security alone is what leads to the evolution of empathy through the empathic brain, the human brain. Right? And once you have a human brain, it yearns for something more than just knowing the only reason you love me is because you need my money. That's not satisfying to the human brain. It's very satisfying to the reptile. In fact, the reptile feels very uncomfortable. If you don't need me, right? If you don't need me, you're going to leave me, says the rational reptile. And so you've got to need me. I've got to keep you weak so that you need me, so that you don't leave me. Because I want you, right? I need you. I need to feed on you sexually, egoically, need you to make me feel better. And so I want a prostitute. I want someone in a dependent state that I can control, give an allowance to. I want that because nothing else makes sense to the rational reptile. There's no real love. People just do what's good for them and manipulate and lie, right? But to the empathic brain, that's lonely. I want someone to care about me. I want someone because they feel joy in my presence. Well, you can't do that with the rational brain. You can't do that with the reptilian brain. You can only do that with empathy, with the empathic brain. And so the something more, to be able to love, to be able to care, to move into a higher brain level. I want that so I can have that experience of belonging, of being a part of things. I feel so separate, right? And so we move tentatively. Is it safe to move into the empathic brain? Not around sociopaths, right? But sociopaths breed sociopaths. It's a loop, right? Right? Gas blowers and mowers breed distraction, right? Sociopaths breed sociopaths. And so, how do you look around and see selfish, sociopathic, unfair, bullying behavior? And who wants to love that, right? So it goes round and round, right? And until we transcend and create something that didn't exist before out of a new protocol, a new technology, the empathic brain. 3 blowers and a mower is too much, so we'll call it a day for now, but we'll continue a bit later.